Good afternoon, Good afternoon, Comrade Matt. It's great to be here, and hello to everyone. I want to acknowledge I'm on the lands of the Kulin people, pay my respects to elders past and present. This isn't what I'm going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about what the union movement's going to be campaigning on for the election, but also beyond the election as well. But I did want to just raise the big issue of the rise of the far right in our country and the mobilisations that are happening around the country every weekend in every capital city and other regional cities as well. And I know that people on this AGM won't underestimate these things, but definitely it's something that the left needs to not underestimate. Of course, a lot of the people participating in these rallies aren't of the far right, but that those far right activists are using this absolutely as recruiting grounds. And I worry that that this whole experience will be a radicalising one for a whole lot of people. So I know there's a lot of wisdom within the foundation, and I think that this would be a really important something for the committee and for members to consider in terms of contribution going forward about what is the best way for this to be countered. Of course, there's a lot of experience that you have. Also, it's not the same as before as well, and we shouldn't see it as exactly the same either. The use of social media being the sort of main issue that makes it quite different. Anyway, I think that that's a huge concern to our country and obviously around the world too. And I also reflect that it's interesting to watch. I don't know if interesting is the right word. I'll let you pick other ones, especially given this has been recorded, that how much the Liberal Party or Liberal National Party has been attacked on both of its flanks. On the left with the voices of movements, which essentially seems to be more professional women in Liberal Party seats standing as independents, absolutely angry and frustrated about inaction around gender equality and inaction around serious issues for women like sexual assault, and also about climate change, the inaction there. And then on the right, they're being faced with the issue of what are people extremists really, like George Christensen and others who are pushing very far the other way. And I know for a long period of time that this has been an issue on the left. It's now something absolutely on the right. So how that plays out in the election, it's hard to say, and I'm sure that Clive Palmer will be making sure that his billions are well spent in terms of, like he did last time, undermining progressive sided politics and making sure that the votes actually go back to the Liberal parties or the LNP. But having said that, I think this is a bit of a different situation that we're facing at the moment. COVID obviously has shown us a lot of things, and one of the big things that it's shown is the inequalities that already exist. That's not a new thing for me to say. Lots of people have said that, but I wanted to point to the issue of insecure work, which is the #1 issue for the trade union movement at the moment in terms of our unifying campaign issue. And it really came to the fore where it was seen that 1 in 3 workers, essential workers, didn't have sick leave in the middle of a pandemic, and people watching with horror, but also some people not with an understanding of why was it that aged care workers were working multiple jobs in insecure work without sick leave in such vulnerable circumstances, especially given that obviously aged care work is not like there are permanent jobs available in every single aged care home with 24/7 shifts. And in a way, aged care workers is an absolute illustration of what's happened to our labour market, and I'll go and talk about that a bit more soon. Also, there was a mass experience in the workforce, first of all, last year with the first lockdown, where millions of people lost their jobs, and so many casuals lost their jobs overnight and suddenly. And that was a traumatic experience for everyone. It all happened to everyone at once. And for a long time, people have been in insecure work, but they've managed to string things together and get other jobs and to cope and then all of a sudden to lose your job overnight because employers obviously, you know, they were faced with those extraordinary circumstances, but also didn't have to consider whether or not, you know, nothing to add up in terms of redundancy pay or other things you've got to consider in terms of letting people go when there's a crisis like that. So I do believe that we're emerging from, well, who knows if we're emerging, but one of the things that we've learned as a country is just how weak it makes our society, let alone the lives of individuals, when it's all built on a foundation of insecure work. Now, obviously, for individuals and for families, being trapped in insecure work is terrible. It means you can't do all of the basics in order to build a life. Not being able to have a reliable income means you don't know how much money you've got to spend every week. Not being able to get loans, you know, basic things like that. It also goes to the heart of the respect that you get at work too, and your sense of self-worth quite often too. If you're in insecure work, you're more likely to experience wage theft, more likely to be sexually harassed, you're more likely to be bullied. Quite often you are just left out of things and not promoted, and not missing out on what a lot of permanent workers do get in terms of their experience in work. And of course, all of this goes back to bargaining power, doesn't it? How much bargaining power you have as an individual, but also constricting or inhibiting your ability to putting more questions in front of you in terms of taking risks, like asking for a pay rise, joining a union, organising for a better workforce, a better working life. So that's at the heart of it. It's an absolute shift in power to the employer, where of course they can let you go just like that. And we've seen the growth of insecure work since we've seen the growth of neoliberalism, probably over 30 years now. And quite often people will just talk about casual work, but casual work is just one form of insecure work. We've now got all these new forms of insecure work. So if comrades didn't know, a new way that a whole lot of retail companies now engage people as part-time flexible hours, and actually most of the check-in workers at the airports are on part-time flexible work. And what it is that you sign a contract when you start with a minimum of hours, let's say it's 10, let's say it's 20, and then every week the employer will just flex you up and down on the roster. And so you have none of the certainty, and you don't get casual loading. And in a way, employers are preferring this because they get the casuals, they get the worker like they're a casual but for cheaper. So that is a big issue. The issue of labour hire, which started off as just being able to source labour for ups and downs, now it's totally replaces whole workforces. And really, it's just a business model of making money out of insecure work, taking a clip on the way through. And in mining, it's just replaced whole workforces, but not just in mining, public sector, right across the economy, pretty much in most areas now, labour hire is a huge issue. It's basically just a way of getting around manipulating our workplace rights so that they can get away with doing that. Then there's fixed term contracts. So these are ones that might go for 12 months, end, you know, in around 2 weeks' time every year. And people on fixed term contracts have to live with all of that stress every single year to see whether or not they're going to be let go every Christmas. And of course, there's the so-called gig economy where app companies, huge multinationals, are making lots and lots of money out of telling people that they're to go and get an ADBN and they're actually their own business, when really they're not. And they have less rights than people had 100 years ago. So you think, okay, there's all these different types of insecure work. Well, why is this happening? Well, I probably don't need to tell people at this AGM why. Employers are doing because it's cheaper. It's in their interest to do it. It's usually absolutely because it's cheaper, and they're doing it because they can, because the laws allow them to do it. Perfectly lawful, perfectly acceptable for them to do so in terms of the industrial laws. In terms of these particular issues, they have not really changed. These laws haven't changed for quite a while, more than a decade in terms of most of these issues, and many of them more than 25 years. So it's not surprising that as new business models arise, that you need to update your laws to make sure that you're protecting the very basic things. Job security, number one. Problem is, though, is that getting industrial laws changed is not easy, as everyone knows, but it is the only solution for us in Australia to turn around the fact that we've got one of the highest rates of insecure work in the world. So we know that that's ahead of us and what we've got to do. In terms of situation that we all face with this, COVID has probably also shifted public opinion a lot too, as I mentioned before, and we certainly know this by looking at the ABC survey that they do every year, huge survey, which shows that 88% of people say that insecure work is a big problem for our country. It's probably also, well, it's definitely also tied to why wages are so low as well, for all of those reasons we talk about. So that this is why this particular campaign at the moment, you will see that there's industrial action happening at lots of different employers, and mainly ones that were essential workers for obvious reasons. And key demands are all about job security, about permanent jobs, about bringing jobs back in-house, around commitments around not outsourcing work. So the strikes at the moment in the transport industry and in warehouses and in food manufacturing that you see are all centred on this particular issue. And so part of what unions are doing is, in a united way, we are putting pressure on the employers of the country to tell them that enough's enough. And if they want to take on one group of workers, they're not just taking on them, they're taking on the whole trade union movement, because we all fight under one banner, and that's that secure jobs are worth fighting for, and it's a national campaign that everyone's part of. And when one group of workers wins, well, that inspires others, that it's possible that by being in a union, you achieve these things, you win more secure jobs. But as I said, the election is coming, and this is a very important key opportunity. So, I mean, we probably could do a call and response to this, but will Scott Morrison act on the issue of job security? Well, let's just consider, does he act on other important issues? What about the bushfires? Well, he doesn't hold a hose, does he? What about Brittany Higgins? Well, said it wasn't his problem. Climate change, doesn't have a plan. Vaccine buying, getting out there and doing that, and saving lives and saving people's livelihoods and saving us from lockdowns. No, it wasn't a race, didn't do that. Quarantine, so did he act on any of that? Of course not, that's not his job. National ICAC, just delay. And of course, aged care in action as well. And in the case of job security, well, it's sort of convenient for him to be lazy and not do anything, because it allows business to do whatever they want, and they like things just the way they are, thank you very much, at the moment. So conveniently lazy, but really fitting in with a general pattern about Scott Morrison as well. He's not exactly John Howard, and probably we shouldn't see him that way, who did have diametrically opposed views to us in terms of what he believed in, but he did believe things and he did act on it. For Scott Morrison, it's all about politics and winning elections and marketing and spin. And so really the only job he really cares about is not any of ours, but of course his own. And we saw this in action earlier this year when they passed a new set of laws. I said industrial laws are hard to change. Well, they passed new laws around casual employment earlier this year, which he touted as meaning that workers would be able to, if you've been in a casual job for longer than 12 months and you've worked regularly, well, your employer would have to write to you and convert you into a permanent job. Well, guess what happened? A couple of months ago, the workers of Australia got their letters from their employers, those who did do it, and ACTU is currently tallying up the figures, but it looks like around 2% were offered permanent jobs. So these laws are useless, utterly, completely useless, and designed to be useless, designed effectively to completely legitimate casual work, to say it's completely fine to have as many as we currently have. So that's the situation we find ourselves in. But of course, I heard the discussion beforehand, every election, it's a contest, and do we trust Labor or the Greens or other parties to make change? Well, On the issue of this particular issue, in terms of insecure work, you probably heard that the Labor Party has made a whole series of commitments on this, which is well thought out policy for how to address each of those forms of insecure work that I talked about. And I do know that the Greens, of course, are also committed to supporting that as well. We've got to consider, of course, the independents and the other parties that will be running in this election. Well, Pauline Hanson and her party voted for those laws for casual employees that have made it worse and actually took entitlements off people. Given a chance, they will take even more rights off workers. Clive Palmer, well, do we need to say anything more? He still hasn't paid back his workers in Townsville. I think that given a chance, and there could be a very good chance that Scott Morrison gets re-elected, and it would be the likes of the UAP and Pauline Hanson that has control of the Senate. Of course, what we will see will be anti-union, anti-worker laws all coming back. We can't afford him in terms of workers' rights, on climate change, on jobs, on aged care, on women, women's equality. And so I'm not trying to explain to you, because I know that you already know. And the bottom line is we can't trust him with workers' job security, because he really cares about the job security of himself. So it's absolutely time that the government's got to be changed. So what can Search Foundation members do? Well, closer to the election, and there's some sort of talk now about, because it's just such a total mess in Parliament, and you see all the crossing of the floor again on the left and on the right within their party, that depending on what happens this week will probably tell us, because I guess Scott Morrison probably can't sustain, months of this next year in the lead up to the election, which would mean that there'll be an early election, now, which would mean just after, at the end of January, calling an election for March, for early March, or for April. And so I would say that next year, what we'd like is if people could volunteer to be part of the union's campaign, we'll send out information on that. I really think that for those people that do have any contact with people who don't, who are undecided or not sure how they are going to vote, simply reminding them of Scott Morrison's track record and what he's done during this pandemic. And, we should never, ever forget that the lockdowns and the lives lost in this year was because he didn't order those vaccines. So even in the most basic way, keeping people safe, very, very dangerous. So I'll leave it there.
Thanks, Sally. So if you've got some time for some questions, Sally, is that okay?
I do.
Yeah, maybe I'll take privilege as the chair and ask the first one. You mentioned the quite inspiring stream of strikes, really, that have been fighting for secure jobs in the past month or so. And there was some good news about the same job, same pay bill up in Canberra, but some maybe less exciting news about industry bargaining. Richard Archer's just also posted there. Are there some some key differences between the movement's position and the ALP that still needs some work to improve conditions for workers? Well,
yes. Winning industry bargaining is really critical, really important in terms of being able for workers to have the bargaining power they need in order to lift wages and to get listened to. Enterprise bargaining, if it worked for some industries for some while, it doesn't work anywhere anymore, and even the bosses say that for different reasons. Fundamentally, everyone should have access to collective bargaining. It doesn't matter the type of workplace that you're in, and that this change is one that's necessary. You see that social democratic parties or the leftist centre parties around the Anglo world that did have enterprise bargaining are moving that way. New Zealand has introduced its new laws. The Labor Party in the UK has also got that as their policy. And the union movement in the US has now got it as their policy too. So we are going to have to keep agitating around this particular issue. Everyone knows that there has to be change in this area, because if you don't improve the bargaining system, well, there's other than collective bargaining, it's very, very hard for workers to be able to win things. And I can't see either side of politics all of a sudden empowering the Fair Work Commission or someone else to fix it all for people anyway. In the end, it will come down to in issues of bargaining power. So yeah, a bit of unfinished business.
Sally, Luke's got a question.
G'day, comrade. Thank you so much for being with us, and thanks for the excellent speech. I was just going to ask about one of the other issues that's kind of obviously a huge important issue for everyone, the climate change. So I noticed some invitations to come to some meetings, ACTU meetings, and if you could just address that that initiative as well.
Yeah, so we have done a lot of work on the issue of renewable energy as a job creator, and that we actually partnered with the ACF, the WWF and the BCA. So very broad and unlikely people to be partnering with. This is all about renewable jobs and the new industries and the new opportunities that are there in front of us. If only we had a government that had the ability to be able to plan and to execute and actually cared about it. So you can access that report, and maybe someone can Google it and put it in the chat. I reckon that'd be best. It's really well worth reading. You'll also see that the number of jobs created is more than jobs that are likely to be lost or will be lost in any of the mining areas because of movements in the international market. A big opportunity for regional Australia that once again is just being lost. And so this is also an important issue because as people know, there's been a lot of effort put into mining communities to tell people that that there's no issue and that their jobs will be there forever. But now we see what's happening with the market, and if one thing we know absolutely about the Liberal Party or the Morrison-Joyce government or the National Party is they will not care less. They will not care less if, and those big multinationals will not care less either, if it shifts and they start withdrawing from the industry, they'll abandon those workers. They absolutely will. And so there's a fair bit of work to be done there, but it needs to be done in a positive in terms of what is the future for their children.
Thanks, Sally. We've got 2 more questions in the chat that I might just ask for any last call for questions there. But Sue, do you want to ask your question to Sally?
Yes, Sally. I was part of the ACTU plan for a couple of elections when you ran the champions up in the northwest of Tasmania, and it was very effective. We got rid of the 3 amigos and we got the Labor candidate re-elected, but they didn't run it last election, and unfortunately we got saddled with Gavin Pearce and another couple of Libs. So is there any intention to do this again?
Yes, I think we will. It will be a bit different to before though. We're mainly focused on workplace delegates and in workplaces because we're discussing the issue of job insecurity and how it directly affects people. But we will be asking those people who aren't in a position, aren't a delegate or aren't in a unionised workplace or aren't in the workforce to be part of the campaign too. So that will also happen in northern Tasmania and in Bass and Braddon. So it'd be great if you could be involved again, Sue.
Okay, thanks.
The next question is from Rose Reid.
Thanks, Matt. It became particularly obvious during the pandemic that women's work was most heavily impacted, and every opportunity for any kind of job saving or job creation, and certainly in the forthcoming period, in terms of job creation, what's the thinking around rescuing women's work and giving it a higher profile, and particularly vis-a-vis the coming federal election?
Yeah, so I guess a lot of us got really sick of all the talk about job creation been all about just one form of infrastructure, so, and not seeing it as social infrastructure as well. And so two key things that need to be done and in terms of jobs that women dominate, childcare, so free childcare in the view of the ACTU. Like, we had that sort of one brief period where as a country we had free childcare, and we actually lifted job seeker, so it was above the poverty line, and we housed homeless people. So, you know, showed all of that could be done, but free childcare would make a big difference, obviously, in terms of that industry, but for women in the workforce, full stop. And secondly, the issue of aged care. You know, just we had that whole Royal Commission, all of the recommendations out of that, and of course nothing's happened in that area. And the key important issue of the quality of those jobs is absolutely determined by really about ratios and making sure that there's proper staffing and proper support for those workers. And at the moment, you know, we know that that's not the case. So those two issues. I'd also say in terms of workers' rights, reforming our equal pay laws, which have been very ineffective ever since community workers won equal pay, very ineffective because precedents now change the way the law works. So we need to address that, and also the issue of 10 days, paid days of family and domestic violence leave is another important reform that we need as well.
Thanks, Sally. We've got one last question from Jeff Evans. Jeff.
Hi, Sally. I hope this isn't a dumb question coming from Central Australia, but interested to find, you know, your thoughts or hear about your thoughts about sort of the state of the movement and hegemony and development of ideas and engagement with workers. Obviously, workers are learning through their lived experience, but I'm wondering where and how ideas are generating through the union movement and the role of organisations like the Search Foundation, and to create a progressive and stronger union movement and a set of ideas that probably go beyond where the Labor Party's at as well.
Yeah, a few things to say here. You know, first of all, there's a lot that happens that you probably wouldn't see. So there's now regular meetings of union leaders and union activists that just discuss innovation, but an innovation in a good way in terms of what's needed in terms of unions for today, especially given some of the big challenges that we face. Some of those challenges are old challenges, but some of them are also new ones. You know, during the pandemic, the whole issue of workplace organising became impossible pretty much in every single workplace, even for essential workers. So, and also the last 2 years has been incredibly disruptive in terms of, I'd say for 18 months, union activists have been on coping, basically. You know, people in healthcare, that goes without saying, and that's going to continue, but actually everywhere. It's been incredibly stressful time for everyone, but an incredibly stressful time for working people. So that's been a disruptor, but then again, it's also thrown up opportunities too. So 2 years ago, there's no way that across the movement that you could have sort of regular delegates meetings that would have thousands of people at them, you know, across states. We'll have a delegates meeting across the whole of the country as soon as the election's called. Unions are, it's opening up in terms of the democratic operation of a lot of unions by using this type of technology, and also providing ability for much more inclusive meetings too, because more people can participate. You're not held back by travel or location, or for many people, you know, being able to attend union meetings when you've also got, you know, people you're caring for too. So what we're then doing as a movement is obviously analysing all of that. Our biggest challenge at the moment, we know what we believe needs to happen in terms of workers' rights, and we sort of have a strategy for that. The big issue, and the one that we are talking about now, is the issue of the right, and it's been manifest in just every single union's had a percentage of their membership that don't want to get vaccinated, and that percentage of their membership is actually quite well organised, well thought out, actually, in terms of the reasons why they don't want to get vaccinated, and are increasingly more hardline and active, and you can see that happening. But that's also happening in a smaller way in workplaces everywhere too. So that's a big issue that everyone's grappling. And I guess we're also, you know, people keep looking forward to when is the pandemic going to be over. And I remember thinking that this time last year, and I think that that'd be a dangerous thing to think at the moment too.
Well, thanks, Sally, and appreciate you being so gracious with your time on a Sunday afternoon to come along to our AGM. And can I, on behalf of all of those present, thank you very much for your time and your thoughts this afternoon, and look forward to standing alongside you and the rest of the movement next year as we get to work. So thanks very much, Sally.
Yeah.